Hi, this is Bruce, and welcome to my tutorial on the PMDG B747-400. We're in a cold and dark condition as set it up on the FMC just ahead of this, and obviously in the external view. And this is where I just want to make a few remarks. This is about a 30-minute cold and dark to taxi ready video, and I hope that it'll help my simming community as well as myself, because if I haven't flown this in a long time, I forget where things are or how the flow works. So hopefully, if you have any comments, feel free to write them in below. We all learn from each other, and I'm sure I'm not making the perfect video, so help me out. Anyway, I'm using P3D version 4.3 Ultimate Traffic Live, as well as P3D's traffic, so you'll see a bit of a mix sometimes out there. Active Sky for the weather, and Chase Plane for the views. Windows 10, NVIDIA GTX 1070 is in use, and an SSD drive and an i5 is overclocked for those that are curious. Okay, let's go ahead and pop on in here to the interior. The yokes have already been dropped with a left click, and they work independently. We're going to go ahead and just left click now on the parking brake there to the pilot's right, down below there by the seat. Then we're going to roll it up here to the overhead, and in the first column right there, battery, the lid, the cover's already up. Left click on that. I can left click on the cover now. That drops down. We don't have to touch that anymore. We're going to right click on standby power. If we leave this off, it limits the number of systems that are going to fire up on the battery. If we put it on auto, it's going to pull from the best source available. If we roll it clear to the right on battery, the only thing that's going to supply the systems is the battery, and you'll wear it out in less than 30 minutes. And that's not a good thing. Then we're going to roll down to the FMC. Should be firing up here any second with the battery on. It takes just a minute to boot. We should see some life come to it any second now. And when that happens, we're going to go ahead and call for ground services here with the FS actions, ground connections rather. Then over here to ground power request, we're going to click on that, and then if we jump outside again, we'll see there's the GPU. Then the lines are going to come up to the bottom of it. There it is right there. There's two of them right there and there. Alright, that's just of interest to note, because when we go back up here to the overhead, you'll see two things. You'll see external power 1, external power 2, and it says available. Left click in each case. The second one is kind of slow, but it does turn on. And when these bars, by the way, are vertical or horizontal like these are, or like these are, that means that they're on and active. So just a FYI. Also, since we're talking about these signals, when you see these yellow lights, you may wonder, what do I need to do? Actually, at this point, nothing. Ignore them. If it says on and off, what it's saying is I'm ready to function, which is on, but there's no way to do that yet, so I'm still off. So just ignore the yellow lights until a little bit later, and they should automatically turn off as the power supplied and hydraulics, etc., etc. So that's that. So we got our GPU unit outside. Then what we're going to do is we're going to turn our nav lights on here in the bottom right corner. By the way, this entire bottom row is all about the lights. Then we're going to turn on the logo and wing also, since we're fiddling around down here. And then the packs here are non-norm. That'll let the air flow throughout the aircraft. So that's a good thing. By the way, if you want to get some nice bright light into a well-lit cockpit already, like daytime, but it's not as bright as you'd like it, just left click on the storm, and you can see how that brightens things up. Also, if it's at night and cold and dark and you can't see hardly anything, if you can make your way at least to the battery, turn it on, and then turn the storm light on, you'll be good to go from there. All the hydraulic demands are off at this point. By the way, this HYD, everything below that line right there down to this line right here, this is the hydraulics right through here. Alright, so those are all off. If any of these are on auto or on at this point, you're going to be forcing the electronics to try and power the hydraulics, and that's not going to be a good thing. If you're looking for the alt flap, if you're following a real flow sheet here instead of just cutting to the chase and not doing all the testing and stuff, you'll want to know that the alt flap's here. It's kind of in a different spot. You might have expected it to be on the overhead, but it's not. Okay. Then what we're going to do is, if we want to turn on the APU, we can do that easily enough. We're going to go ahead and turn off the APU bleed here in the third column below the packs. We're going to go down to the ECAS page, which is going to be here in this panel. I'll pop it up. It just takes a second to appear down here in the bottom corner. And then we're going to hit the stat. And when we press stat, you'll see APU is right here with exhaust gas, N1, N2, oil quantity. There's nothing in there yet. We'll just leave that open because we can roll it back up here to the top, and we can go ahead and press, or right click rather, to start. It'll automatically jump back to on. One thing to notice, because you're probably used to turning on some kind of fuel pump to provide fuel for the APU, this is all done with system logic. It's done by the computer. And what you're going to notice is this press is going to go out. It won't stay on, but it'll be just dark. It'll happen the minute I get it to start, so watch. There it goes, it's off. Later on, when we do turn on the fuel pumps, we'll be turning that on also, and you'll see an on appear right there. Now down here, we're watching, and you'll see N2 start up first, which is these figures, there they go, and then N1 will follow. And since that's kind of a natural accomplishment, we're not going to follow it all the way up, but it takes about a minute, and what we're waiting for is the APU Gen 1 and the APU Gen 2 to say available down this column right here and this column right there. And when it does, we'll left click both of them, and then these will show available, but we're not going to use the external powers anymore. So while we're waiting for that, we can then go ahead up here and get our IRSs aligned just above it. We'll just right click each one to nav. Okay, now you can see that the Gen 1, Gen 2s are available. Notice these went to available. Then what we can do is get rid of the ground power unit. I'm just going to go ahead and hit Shift 2 to pull up the FMC this way, and left click the soft key here. What's happening outside is, you can see the cables there on the ground, they just disappeared. So now we're just on the APU for the power, and the GPU has been removed. Then we're going to go ahead and arm our emergency light, which is up here. All you have to do is left click on the cover, and when it closes, that little switch moves down and it's covered. Now, because we need some parking breakability and steerage and stuff for pushback and start, we need to put one of these hydraulic systems on aux. And it's this last one, it's the only one that can do that. That'll help supply it via the electronics, or the APU rather. And then we're going to, after this, we always do this first, then right click the others to auto. This one pulls it from the APU, these pull it from electrical, and I still think that probably pulls it from electrical too, but I can't guarantee it, but I believe so. I might have made a mistake a second ago when I mentioned it. Then we're going to press all of our fuel pumps on. We got main tank 1 and 2, 3 and 4, okay? And then there's override, there's center, and then there's a stabilizer tank, just to highlight those. Right now we're just doing the mains, so main forward, aft, number 2, main 3 forward, aft, main 4 forward, aft. And if we're wondering, do I have any fuel in the center or the stabilizer tanks, you can find that out as well in the ECAS by clicking on fuel, and then you can draw this up. And at this point it shows that, yep, we're fully loaded with fuel. That means that I'm going to want to turn on the center tanks and the stabilizer tanks, and let's see what happens when we do. I'll just leave that there. If we turn on the center tanks, they're going to go green, and that's because it shows that the pumps are working. We can also turn on the overrides here, and what those do is they turn blue, and that means that they're not being used at the moment. This is all computer logic, so if you did turn those on, in fact you should probably for takeoff, from what I've read, to give the engines more fuel pressures, helps for powering the aircraft on takeoff. It will use them if it wants them, and these will turn green. So don't sweat it if you want to turn those on. In fact, I'd recommend it unless you're given a warning later to turn them off. And then the stabilizer tank here, if you turn those on, it shows that they are not needed yet either, and that's because they will not feed the stabilizer tank fuel into the center tank until this is about 80,000 pounds. But it's ready, and it's all, again, electronically, logically oriented. Now these here, these cross feeds, this is when you've got, if you have more weight, for instance, in the main 1 and main 3, you add these two numbers together, 84 and 84, and they obviously outweigh the mains in 1 and 4, that's only 60 total. Then you're going to leave the fuel cross feed 1 and fuel cross feed 4 in the horizontal line or open condition. Let's see what it looks like when they're off. Now the bar is going to go this way. See how that works? It shows you that they've been cut off. But we're going to leave those on, of course, because we have more weight in here than we have here. When these become equal or less, then we'll take these 1 and 4 off. Don't bother with 2 and 3. It's got a cover over them, and the cover's over them for a reason. So just leave those be. So, assuming we're not going to change our fuel load right now, I'll show you how to do it later. We will change it eventually. I'm going to drop it down to about 90,000 pounds total, which means that we'll have to turn off the center tank pumps and stabilizers because there's nothing in them. Alright, pressing ahead here. We've talked about the cross feeds. I'm looking at my flow sheet here. Then we're going to do the pack knobs. We're going to turn 2 and 3 off. The literature says you can leave 1 on. Some say they turn them all off, but I don't think you need to do that. It'll fire up just fine because that's controlling the airflow between the engines, the APU, the air conditioning, and the pneumatics. That's quite a lot, isn't it? So to reduce 2 of these is to give more airflow to the engines when we want to start them. The isolation valves should be open. It allows air to flow between the packs when the time comes. APU bleed now. Press on. Trim air switch, by the way, is up here. What that does is it takes hot air from the engines and mixes it for controlling temperature inside. The upper and lower recircs, those are for the cabins to move air throughout the fuselage. And the aft cargo heat you don't need to bother with unless you've got vegetables and animals back there, which in this sim, we're not going to do that. Window heat's down here, it's already on. And now we're going to drop down and get some nav information and other details out of the FMC. So left clicking in the window draws it up like this, or shift 2. Shift 3 will pull up the co-pilots, by the way. We're going to go ahead and return and look at the various options. Now, by the way, if this is menu, this is where it'll start. Go to FS Actions. Then here's your fuel. Let's go ahead and give us, let's go 120,000 just for fun. I'm sure that's too much. In fact, I will have figured this out more accurately, but for demo, I'm just winging it right now. You could pick long range, medium range, short range. Those are preset fuel loads. Like let's try short range. Pops in 127, medium 255, and long range. The wings are really dipping 282. So I'll leave it on short range. Then go back to return payload. We can go. These are presets. We can set it to max. We can set it to empty. We can set it to random. You can also set your own numbers in there. You can enter a different figure here, 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 and here, and here. So very adjustable. The doors, now you may think, what happened to all the individual doors? Well, there's 4 pages. Right click to the next page. There's our door entries. Notice this one's needing to be closed. So we'll click on that, and it'll close that door that was open on the left side of the passenger entry portion when we started the video. And then we'll click arm, and we'll leave it at that. Then the next page, actually I'll disarm it. There we go. We want to join the other ones, make them all alike. The next page shows you your cargo doors, and the 4th page is just not much really. It's just a few little things. So we'll leave that like this. And then we'll go to menu again. We'll look at this one more time. This is where I got your cold and dark start or default long short range flights. It's all presets here. Those are handy. So once we've gone through all those, oh, by the way, the setup is interesting. The aircraft has all kinds of equipment, 22 pages of options there. You'll want to roll through those at least once, and then also displays and failure rates and etc. are there. So very, very handy. Nice to have all that featured. All right, let's go ahead then and go to the FMC, and we'll get this thing rolling. First page doesn't need to be dealt with. Pause init on the bottom right needs to be clicked. We are currently at Chicago, K-O-R-D. And we'll click that in the reference airport. I never bother entering the gate. The nav data out of date, just clear that. Then enter IRS position. That is right there in the GPS pause. So right click to the, or left click to the right of it, then left click to the right of those boxes. That enters the data into those boxes. Now the IRS is in position. Then we can go route RTE. We're going to want KORD again for our origin. And then we're heading to Denver. Not a very long flight for this aircraft. Get it in the destination box. Flight number 1794 is always my go-to. And the runway is going to be 28 right. Okay, we don't need to activate it yet. Then we're going to go depart and arrive. We're going to depart Chicago. Not listed yet, so right page. Not listed yet, right page. 28 right. Already said selected, but I like to go through this anyway. There is no SID available, standard instrument departure, so we'll then click on departure arrive button down here again, go to arrive for Denver. Now we know that there's a little bit more information. I am looking for 35 right, ILS, and then I'm going to do the anchor for standard terminal arrival route, and the OBH is my entry point to the star. And then it wants to know, hey, what's your transition? And it's going to be Pearl down here for the approach. So I'll click on that, and then I go route. That's looking good. Activate, execute. Then we're going to look at the legs. And there's nothing here before OBH. There will be some that I'll enter in, for instance, that we'll want to apply. But for right now, I'll just run through the rest of it, and we'll pause and come back and finish that later. We're just looking for any discontinuities. There's a vector. That's not a discontinuity. What that means is when the star is finished, the ATC will give us vectors to our approach, which starts with Pearl. So that's as it should be. We'll just keep rolling through 5 and 6, and then we'll roll. It automatically goes back to 1. So I'm going to pause it just for a second and be right back. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to need to set an entry waypoint or a VOR here, because there's going to be a jetway applied, J10. So it's going to start off with IOW. Click it in the box. It wants to know which one. We're going to click the top one. Then we're going to choose a jetway, and what we'll do then is we'll go to route, and then we'll go to second page. And you'll see the IOW there. The next one there, this blank, is where the jet route's going to go in. So we'll go J10, enter it in that flat spot. To what point? Well, interestingly enough, J10 takes us right to the start of the star OBH. So I'm going to click on OBH to enter it here in the working boxes, and then put it up in those boxes. And now, when we go to legs, here's all these other ones. Well, DSM is the only one in this case. We entered that one manually. This one was put in automatically because of the jet route, and that's the start of our star. So now we can go ahead and execute that, and everything in there is as it should be. Then we're going to hit the init ref. We've got all these boxes to fill in. You don't need to look up a big list of things. Just click to the left of zero fuel weight. It'll enter it down here. Click it again. It enters it in the box. Obviously, that's filled in. The reserves, just put a 2 in there for fun. I'm not paying for fuel, and there's a lot lower numbers usually applied, but I want the most power and speed I can get out of this thing, so I just run it up to 90. Good thing that the company's paying for it, and I'm not, right? 35,000, or excuse me, 36,000. I made a mistake, so I'll just hit clear. 36,000 as we're heading west, and we'll put that in there. Thrust limits now bottom right. Don't need to do anything. Takeoff now. Flaps are 20 for standard takeoff. Click that in there, and then if you look through here, you got your references now. So we got V1, V2, or VR rather, and V2. I'm just clicking to the right, and they get bigger like this, and that enters them in the speed strip over here. You can just barely see them in that green there. And then the center of gravity is not listed. Again, rather than look it up, click the soft key to the right of it. There it is, 21. Click it again, and then in a second it's going to add the trim. 5.6 plus 5.6. So we'll remember that when the time comes. Other than that, you've got all these other things in there that you could put in. You got the progress page, which is good for the co-pilot. In fact, I'll bring that up in a minute and just do that. The nav radio is a good one. This shows you that it's already got the nearest VOR waypoint in here as its frequency. And when we get closer to, it says park. When we get closer to Denver, that's not going to say park anymore. It'll automatically, based on the approach and runway that I chose, it's going to enter the frequency and the runway heading automatically here. These can all be done manually, by the way, but it's handy when it's so automated like this. It makes it a lot faster. So we'll leave that on legs. We'll put that back down in there. We'll pull up the co-pilots. We'll click on FMC. We'll click on program. It's just nice to have a couple of different points of view. All right, we're doing good. Now, we can take off the wheel chocks, which I don't think are off yet, right? Nope, they're right here. These little yellow stripes behind the tires, not going anywhere until those things are out of the way. So we'll go ahead and pull up the FMC. We'll go down to the menu. We'll go to FS Actions. We'll go to, say, Pushback, for instance, and we'll hit Remove Wheel Chocks. There we go. Now those will have disappeared. Now, if we wanted to push back here shortly, we could. We're not going to do it quite yet, but you would enter in the distances here. These, by the way, are not, it'll always say 265 no matter what the real distance is, and that's where it's a bit of a headache because you don't know quite what the distance is unless you got the right software for that. I don't. You can tell it which way to turn the tail. Whatever it says is what it's going to do, and then you enter the degrees here, and then you'll hear the guy talking to you like the standard Microsoft Flight Simulator did and the P3D does. You just go Shift P and push straight back. No sweat. That's available too, but there's no voice with Shift P. This one will tell you what to do as you do it when you hit start. So I use GSX usually. I might come back and try this anyway just for demo, but just to tell you that that's where that's at. So now we're chock free and we should be in a good spot. Our doors are closed. Now we're going to work on the autopilot a little bit. Bring it in a little closer so we can see more clearly what to do. First thing I always do is turn on my flight directors. Left or right click will do this. There we go. And then we're going to run back and we're going to right click on VOR left, VOR right for the pilot, and the same thing for the co-pilot. They're over there like that. The outer knob here can go radio or with a left click or a barometer with the right click. This is set for inches. If I was in Europe, I would put it on the other. This is where you can get your, where you, for the ND, the navigation display. It's on map right now. You can go VOR, you can go approach, but we'll leave it on plan, or map rather. If you want to put it on plan, you can to check your continuities, but since we've already looked through that visually, it's not really necessary. The distance out that this will show, we're going to right click it up to 20. If you want to see traffic, just press the traffic button. There, it took it away. There, it brought it back. This is for the weather, VORs, waypoints, airports, data, position, and terrain. And we don't need to mess with those. Down here, by the way, since we're fiddling around, this is the pilot's radio here. It works just great. Just dial it in. I'm going to put the old VATSIM 122.80 in there. Left click it across to the active. If you want to talk to, this is really interesting. If you turn on the ATC that comes with P3D, it'll show, maybe it'll show on your screens or not, I don't know, but this is it right here. And I can click on O'Hare ATC clearance all day long and nothing happens. But if I click on this mic button right here above the left VHF, now it works just great. You can hear it. So I'm going to leave the mic off for now just for quiet's sake, but I didn't know that at first and it really bugged me for a while. Then I figured that out, so I thought I'd share it. Down here we want to have the seat belts on auto, the no smoking on auto. We've also, I might as well just roll it around and keep going since we're down here. A little off track, but RTO for rejected takeoff for brakes. Here's your squawk over here for codes. It works very easily. You can see how it operates. We're going to start off with the transponder. On the transponder setting, right there, that's the 2 over. If we're taxiing and we're crossing active runways, we can use the traffic advisory, but definitely when we're on the departure runway and in the air and flying until we land, we want to use traffic advisory, resolution advisory, which will tell us to climb, descend, and all those sorts of things in case there's some conflict with other traffic. This is your weather radar in here. These are all indicating various things. The TFR, if I remember right, I'm looking it up right now. For some reason it's escaping my thinking here. TFR is terrain following radar. There you go. Weather turbulence, map, ground clutter. So those are all in that area as well. I think that'd be about it. I'm going to go ahead and put the co-pilots on 122.800 as well. Bring it across. And that should keep us out of trouble for a little while. So we can assume, right? All right. Then we're still going to set up here the autopilot things, the auto throttle switches. We can, or the auto throttle arm. We can take that off for right now. The heading indicator we'll want to use with the runway heading. We'll just generalize it right now. We'll line it up more specifically when we get out there. The altitude that we're going to climb to, 10,000 is a great place to start. ATC will give us a different figure, but you know, just run it up and down as you need to do that. The vertical speed, holding that altitude, localizer approach, flight level change. That's pretty handy actually for climbing. It'll keep a steady speed and adjust the rate of climb as you go along. Same thing for descent. Vertical nav, LNAV, we can go ahead and arm both of those right now. They won't work, of course, until we turn on the AP over here. And then thrust speed. This little screw here is kind of important. If you left click it, you get the takeoff go around power supplied. If you middle click, or if you if you click your mouse wheel, it'll turn off the auto throttle. And if you right click that little screw there, it turns off the autopilot. So super handy to know, and just to keep track of that. Oh, by the way, if you want to get the compass rose going, it's like all the other ones. Just hit center here, and you get the rose instead of the arc. The FPV is for a little dot that's going to appear. If I click it, and it's super handy. By the way, meters, just throws the meters above the feet. Don't need it in the United States. Right in this section here, a little dot's going to appear. Watch. That little dot is the actual axis in real time of your aircraft. So if it's in the blue, you're climbing. If it's in the brownish, orangey color down here, you're descending for sure. If that little dot's to the right, you're being blown perhaps by the wind to the right, so you're drifting right. If it's to the left, you may be drifting left. What you want to do, and it's in relationship to the ground, so what you want to do is keep it dead center there for horizontal flight without drift. That's more handy actually when you're manually on approach to final or on immediate takeoff for the first several hundred feet climb. You're trying to maintain a straight and true runway heading. It's just follow that and with your rudder, and it should keep you out of trouble. So we've looked down below too for the radios, passenger signs, auto brakes, transponder. I couldn't find a TCAS biasing mode switch in this aircraft. It might be somewhere, I'm not aware of where it is. The flight deck door, by the way, normally you would just click deny to the right and then do some indication, but I've never seen those indicated, so I might be missing something there too in case somebody's following some other approach to the flow sheet. Then we're going to go back up here to the overhead, and we're going to turn the beacon on to both, and that tells the people on the ground and around us that, yep, we are going to be moving here very, very soon, and now we're going to do the pushback. So just take a quick look outside. I got to get a general sense of how far this is. Yeah, I'm going to back it out a little ways. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and, yeah, I think that's what we're going to do. Yeah, this is a funny thing to do, but I end up doing it all the time anyway. I'm going to have my tail going left, and so we'll pull it back up. This is a guessing by golly, so let's try 350 for the distance. If I overshoot it, I overshoot it. Tail's going to go left. I want maybe 100 degrees instead of just 90. Nope, that won't do it. I'm going to have to do maybe just 90. Doesn't like that idea. Oops. Sorry. Need to eat breakfast, I think. There we go. All right. Well, let's start and just see what happens.
Cockpit to ground. Go ahead. We've been cleared for pushback and start. They want the tail to our left. Roger that. Ready to push. Tail to the left. Park brakes off.
Okay, we just took our parking brake off. This actually works pretty swiftly. You don't have to wait very long.
Brakes released.
And if worse comes to worse, we'll hit stop, right?
Brakes released. Here we go.
All right. I'm going to shift it back now because I probably overestimated perhaps the distance that we're going to travel. I just hit shift 2 to pull that back up. I can hit stop anytime now if I want to. So I'm just going to keep an eye on it, make sure things pan out like they should. I know this is boring, but in fact I'll go ahead and put pause on here just for a second. We'll come right back. Okay, we're getting there. It looks like I guessed in by golly pretty closely to 350. You can see this big arc that it takes to push it back. GSX would have us much more closely aligned with the actual taxi lines. I'm going to go ahead and just stop it here pretty soon. We overshot it maybe by about 25-30 feet, who knows. There we go. Let's just stop there. We'll kick it back inside. Go ahead and put our parking brake back on. And let's continue on with what we were going to be doing here. We're going to go ahead and start our engines now. So we want to then go to the overhead. And the engine continuous switch, we can leave that on with the left click. Then we're going to pull. We can do two at a time. We're going to do the outsides first on the left wing, right wing, and then the insides 2 and 3. And what we'll be seeing is, and I'm going to go ahead and leave this up as well here. This panel here, you want to put it on engine now, and I'll pull it up for a better visibility. You see those little magenta lines or little pink lines, whatever they're called, purple? That's about 14%. When the N2 hits 14%, then we can turn on the fuel valves. So let's go ahead and do that. And by the way, we can take off our centers now because remember we reduced our fuel loads and it was telling us that there was a problem there, so we've reduced those. Now we're going to right click on 1, right click on 4. Be ready because it happens really fast. 14 is going to pop up real quick. There, I'm going to left click on the left fuel valve and number 4 fuel valve. So now I've fed fuel to both of these. They'll run up and settle in. You'll hear it click, or we can just go to the overhead. When they click in, it's automatic, and then those lights will go out. And then we'll go ahead and right click on 2 and 3, and we'll repeat what we just did. It won't take long. This aircraft produces some really nice sounds too. And there we go. Alright. Then we're going to right click 2 and 3. Come back down here to the starter valves, or the fuel valves again. It's 14, we're left clicking. And there we go, number 2 and number 3. Now all our fuel valves are open. We don't need to be in here anymore, so we'll get rid of that. We'll put it back where it belongs. Leaving it on fuel, I think, is a good one because you're having to monitor fuel all the time and change. Like when these two tanks are outweighed or equal to these two tanks, remember, we'll take off the cross feeds. You can also set up some automatic features in there. And then this little bit in here, like auto throttle disconnect, TCAS off, FMC message. There's no message right now. Put that back on legs. So we can clear that by hitting cancel here with the left click. They'll go away. If you wished you hadn't, hit the recall here and they'll come back. But for right now, I think we're in safe enough condition that we can just turn those things off. Then we're going to go back up again to the overhead, and we'll want to turn our packs on, numbers 2 and 3, which we turned off to start our engines. We can turn off the APU bleed. We can turn off the APU now. The hydraulic demand switch number 4, see it says pressure. We want to right click it back to auto so it joins the others. So now all 4 of the hydraulics are on auto. If it's less than 10 degrees centigrade or so, it will turn on the nacelle anti-ice switches here. Otherwise we will not. And we're never going to turn on the wing anti-ice until we're airborne. So that's just a little FYI. Then the stabilizer trim, remember it was 5.6. That's in a figure down here. I've got this thing linked to my joystick. We want it to go about 5.5. So we're just drawing that little white line up a little bit right there. Then since we're going to be taxiing and running around here, I'm going to run now over here to put TA only, traffic advisory only on the TCAS. And then the flaps need to be 20, 1, 5, 10, 20. And if you want to see visually where it's happening, this shows you right here too in the center display. So they're coming down. That does it. When we line up at the runway, we'll turn our landing lights on, our strobe light, which are those big bright flashing double flashes on the wingtips. We don't want to have everybody blinded at night if we're at night. Heading indicator is set. Continuous ignition can be left on if the weather's bad. We'll put the TCAS, the squawk area down there for TARA, and then the weather radar here. You can go ahead and click that one, and that'll give us the weather. As you can see here, it just takes a minute or so for the weather to appear, and then we'll left click on that screw right here, and that'll give us our takeoff go around power that we're looking for. Other than that, that's it. On the climb out, by the way, I should have adjusted this. I'll show you what I'm doing here. Let's just do this real quick. We'll go init ref, and we'll hit takeoff, and we're looking for V2 153. That's the takeoff speed that we'll maintain right there, and we'll maintain that, and then we'll hit gear up, autopilot at 500 feet, and then above 1200 feet we'll continue on our climb power as usual, and angle it out, pick up some speed. So at that's all I need to share with you right now. Thanks so much for listening. Feedback's always appreciated. Have fun, enjoy yourselves, take care, bye-bye.